Hello and welcome to Beyond the Box Score, episode 19 now underway. I'm Trayvon Hastings. With me, as always, my partner in crime, Joey Korzanowski. We didn't get a chance to recap the national championship game. We didn't get a chance to recap the divisional round of the NFL playoffs, but we do get a chance now to recap the conference championship games, preview this Super Bowl, and then also go over all of the head coach hirings in the NFL, as well as the offensive and defensive coordinator hires that stuck out to us. And with that in mind, we're going to jump right into the head coaching cycles. Todd Monken now to the Browns, that being official in the last hour and a half. What are your thoughts as a Browns fan of this hire?
Yeah, so it's very mixed feelings to put it that way. First of all, it's kind of out of left field, right? Because first it was, they really want Grant Udinski, and then it was, they're all in on Nate Shieldhouse, and then they're all in on Jim Schwartz. So this kind of feels like, I don't want to say it feels like their last option, but it just kind of came out of nowhere. And I do believe that, they're excited about Todd Monken. So I see the vision. I see where they're coming from. He's a good offensive mind. He's had success wherever he's been. He's kind of looked at as a quarterback developer in a sense because he was with Lamar Jackson and Lamar had his best stats as a passer under Todd Monken. Last year he threw for over 40 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and like 4,100 yards. He should have won MVP, but that's a different conversation. But yeah, and then during his time at Georgia, he won 2 national championships with Stetson Bennett, which is certainly impressive. So he's had success where he's been, and he's been able to raise the quarterback play. So I do think that they have hope that he can either resurrect something with Deshaun Watson or he can continue the development of Shador Sanders. So I like it from that aspect. The only difference is it doesn't really excite the fan base, and I think that's kind of the biggest thing here because a lot of people wanted to move on from Stefanski. All right, fine, but then I think as this head coaching search went on, a lot of people really wanted that younger hire. Everybody wants to find that next Sean McVay, right? I know that term always gets thrown around, but I just think that was kind of their goal out of all of this. So then to end up with an almost 60-year-old, first-time head coach, it just seems a little interesting. So we could sit here and question the process all we want, but we can look at the end result. I don't know if they'll be able to keep Jim Schwartz or not. There's some turmoil going on there. Who knows what's going to happen? He's still under contract, but I think it's hard to grade this hire because a lot of people right now can call it a failure, and yeah, they might be right. But what happens if the Browns go, 500 next year? It would not be a failure at all, in my opinion. So I think it's going to depend what the on-field results are, and that goes for most hires. But as for my initial feelings, very, very much in the middle. I see where they were coming from. I think it makes sense. I like it from an offensive perspective, but it's just kind of hard to get super excited about it.
I also have, while not being like, I don't have any personal bias. I'm not a Browns fan. I have family members who are, but I am not. I will say, I agree for the most part. Like, I'm pretty net neutral on this one. Monken has a offensive scheme, at least from being in Baltimore, that you would think caters to the tight ends, caters to the run game, a mobile quarterback, which the Browns, for the most part, have those pieces in place. What they don't have, which Monken had in Baltimore, is the stability on the offensive line, the insurance of Zay Flowers in the receiving room in Baltimore. They don't necessarily have that in Cleveland. Jerry Jeudy, I would definitely say, is probably not the receiver Zay Flowers is. In fact, they're just completely different archetypes of receiver. And also, they don't have the quarterback necessarily in what Lamar Jackson is in comparison to the Cleveland Browns' entire quarterback room. So I also agree on the mixed front. I also think, in terms of, for me, I felt like the Browns needed some sort of leader of men, somebody who could go in there, command the locker room, get the best out of them. The guys that are like the Mike Tomlin types. I'm not saying Mike Tomlin should have went to the Browns. What I am saying is someone of the motivator tree, someone who can be a tactician in that way to where they can motivate these guys, get the best out of them, and be a ceiling raiser rather than a floor raiser in this aspect. And in some cases, those mean the same thing for some teams, but just being able to elevate that team's ceiling by a few extra games, which I think we can all agree Tomlin has done that in Pittsburgh for several years now. But this doesn't it's not a flashy hire. It's not one that really moves needles. It doesn't move eyes. Like it's not one of those hires where you're gonna get on all fours for. So I agree overall that it is a pretty mixed hire. There are some other ones that are probably less mixed. I know I personally wasn't the highest on the Kevin Stefanski hire for the Falcons, but that could also just be me. I think he was someone who had all the time in the world and had a all-world quarterback, albeit after missing 2 years. And he had a chance to elevate the Browns in their offense, and it just never really happened. And there's a lot of reasons why. And I think for the type of offense Stefanski wants to run, I'm not sure if Atlanta is the right place for him to do that.
Yeah, I think I'll actually disagree. I really like this hire. So in terms of Stefanski, I mean, obviously being a Browns fan, I got to witness everything up close and personal for the last 6 years. A lot of people like to throw around the term offensive guru, quarterback whisperer with Kevin Stefanski. I don't necessarily believe those. I don't really. I think those are a little overblown, but I do think when given the talent, Kevin Stefanski can succeed. You saw that in Cleveland, right? 2020 when he had a fully healthy quarterback in Baker Mayfield, when he had a pretty good roster, they won games. 2021, your quarterback was injured, you managed to go 500 with a pretty decent roster. 2022, you just had quarterback instability. 2023, you were able to catch lightning in a bottle with Joe Flacco, and then 2024 in this past season, you had like 7 different quarterbacks. So it's just been a combination of a bad roster and just an overall bad situation. But that's what makes it really hard to gauge where Kevin Stefanski's at. But I think he went to a pretty good situation here. Look, I mean, it's no secret the Falcons are not short of talent. I mean, I think Bijan Robinson is going to have a even better season than he did last year. I mean, because just take a look at what a healthy Nick Chubb did in Kevin Stefanski's offense just a couple of years ago. I mean, he was phenomenal. Even Quinshon Judkins was pretty good this year, when available before he got hurt. So I think Stefanski, I think it's a good fit for both sides. I think Stefanski needs to go to a team that has players and that has talent. I think Drake London's going to have a phenomenal year. Take a look at what Amari Cooper did under Kevin Stefanski. Amari Cooper had some of the best games of his career when he was the true wide receiver one, and he had a good relationship with his quarterback. But that's where I think my questions come in, is the quarterback. So originally when Stefanski took the job, I thought, if you can't bank on Penix, you've got Kirk Cousins, right? Well, apparently the Falcons are going to cut Kirk Cousins, which I don't understand because he actually played pretty well to end the season, for his standards. And Kevin Stefanski obviously has a relationship with Cousins from their time in Minnesota. So I know you take the job assuming Penix is going to be healthy, but he's had some, he has a pretty lengthy injury history. You don't know how he's going to bounce back. So I think it's going to be interesting there, especially for Stefanski. You came from a job where you had nothing but quarterback instability the last, 3-4 years. And now you're going to take a job where, you've got more talent around at other positions, but you still kind of have that quarterback instability. So I think for me, I like the hire. I think that Stefanski can get a lot out of this roster. I think it's a good fit for both sides, but that is a big looming question mark, is Michael Penix. What can Stefanski get out of his quarterbacks? Because I'm sure you would agree, one of the knocks on Kevin Stefanski is that he has coached the aggressiveness out of his quarterbacks, and you kind of saw that with Deshaun Watson, right? It's a lot of RPOs, not a ton of downfield passing. So I'll be interested to see if Stefanski can kind of learn from his first tenure as a Browns head coach, because let's be real, 6 years, a 6-year tenure as a head coach in the NFL is kind of long. Not many coaches really last that long. So that's a lot of time to learn and grow, and we'll see if he'll be able to take that to Atlanta. But yeah, he definitely is going to have the talent to work with.
He's definitely going to have the talent to work with. I do agree. He also is bringing over Tommy Rees to be the offensive coordinator of the Falcons. They also added special teams coordinator Craig Aukerman, and all these hires made in conjunction with the new president of football operations, former Atlanta Falcons quarterback Matt Ryan. So he definitely was not playing around here. He got pretty active early on as soon as he took over in finding this next head coach. And I guess for me, part of the disdain in the hire isn't so much to do with Kevin Stefanski, but more so the fact that they let go of Raheem Morris for going 8-9 again, when I don't think a lot of the problems on the roster necessarily, or why they missed the playoffs, weren't really his fault. I mean, they technically tied for the division lead. They didn't win the division because they lost to the 3-win Jets. And another aspect in this season for Atlanta was the simple fact that their quarterback got hurt. And they had to play with Kirk Cousins down the stretch. I'm not making any excuses because the reality is Atlanta has added so many pieces in the last 2 years to get to the point of winning that division and being a contender, and they just weren't. However, I do think Raheem Morris kind of got the bone end of the stick, and he got let go. So I think the Stefanski hire is one that, similarly how you said to Todd Monken, it's hard to grade it because we've seen Stefanski have a successful season with a healthy team, but then every other year it feels like there's always been setbacks or roadblocks in the way to really see what the true potential is of not only himself but the Browns. So I'll be curious to see how that looks. A couple other hires that stuck out to me that were not head scratchers, just not the first names I probably would have picked. So Steelers go get Mike McCarthy. I don't hate the hire. I just think it's a change in who the voice is, but I think everything being preached will be the exact same. So I think Mike Tomlin and Mike McCarthy are pretty much the same person, just different bodies, different everything. Uh, Overall, I don't really think it's a needle mover for the Steelers. I think they'll still be in the same, fluctuating around 500 type of team and those type of seasons on a year in year out basis. And also, it brings the question, McCarthy, Aaron Rodgers, we know the history there. Is Aaron Rodgers actually wanting to come back and play another season? He made it sound like this was going to be his last year, but is he not satisfied with it being his last season? And if so, would he want to return and play for his former head coach in Green Bay, Mike McCarthy?
Yeah, I think it's a big question. I would be surprised if he came back. I think you saw he still was able to play well enough this year, but I mean, you could just clearly tell he was 41 years old. I mean, you could just tell he's clearly lost a step after multiple injuries. The arm talent is still there, but I do question, how much of that was Arthur Smith's play calling. Maybe Aaron is more comfortable with Mike McCarthy's play calling. I really don't know what their relationship is. I mean, obviously they won a ton of football games together. So maybe they feel like they can kind of recreate that for one more year. But if Aaron doesn't come back, I think this just makes it an even tougher situation for the Steelers. I understand where they're coming from with the hire, but I think it gets to a point where you just got to bite the bullet and you just got to start fresh, right? That's kind of what the Jets did. Yeah, they hired Aaron Glenn last year. They realized that they weren't going anywhere with their current roster. You traded away Quinnen Williams. You traded away Sauce Gardner. You blew it up. You started acquiring assets and you began the rebuild. And if you're the Steelers, I understand they think that they can probably win with this defense, although I think their defense is aging, and you saw that throughout the season. I still think that you have a lack of weapons outside of DK Metcalf, and you've got a decent running game, sure. How much is Mike McCarthy going to elevate a receiver room outside of DK Metcalf that's just simply lackluster? If his quarterback is Mason Rudolph or Will Howard, how much is he going to get out of them? It's a lot of unknown. I kind of agree with you. I like the hire in general. I think Mike McCarthy can still be a good offensive mind. I will say, it's kind of interesting that he wasn't more sought after. It kind of felt like the Steelers were his only option. I think he's from Pennsylvania or so. He's from the area, I believe, so he kind of had a special tie to it. But I thought maybe that'd be somebody the Browns could go after. I thought maybe not necessarily the Giants, man. Obviously, if you had Harbaugh, but just other teams with openings. I'm surprised his name wasn't thrown around more. So maybe people or maybe teams feel like his offense is a little outdated. Maybe they feel like he just doesn't have it anymore around the league. I'm not really sure, but yeah, for the Steelers here, it seems like they're going to be stuck kind of in that circle of 500 or in that bubble of just barely missing the playoffs. But luckily for them, the AFC North is going to be wide open again. I mean, obviously nobody really expects the Browns to be much more than 500. The Bengals probably going to be 500 again. The Ravens, I think, are a bit of a question mark, although I do think they will be better than they were last year. But, I mean, as far as the Steelers are concerned, it's their division to lose. So, I see where they're coming from with the hire. Wouldn't have been my personal choice. I think they could have benefited from kind of a younger guy. Because think of what they did their last two hires with Mike Tomlin and Chuck Noll. I mean, they were younger guys at the time that you knew you were going to have for a long time. That's not necessarily the case for Mike McCarthy. That's more of a we feel like we can win now hire. So I think it's an interesting approach. I don't necessarily agree with it, but I think it's all going to come down to the quarterback.
I agree. And they also signed McCarthy to a 5-year contract. So they expect him to be there for the foreseeable future, and I'm sure he does himself. We're going to keep it in the AFC North to, I would say, probably quickly discuss this one. I don't really have a lot of thoughts because first-time head coach Jesse Minter leaves the Chargers as the defensive coordinator, going to Baltimore to be the head football coach. And he's not the only first-time head coach that will be in the AFC, because Packers defensive coordinator Jeff Hafley does the exact same thing, leaving to go to Miami and be the Dolphins head football coach. So a couple of interesting hires there. I think the Ravens hire makes sense. Minter is a defensive guy. Their defense has been rather lackluster some of the past few years. And one aspect to what the Ravens have become known for, which is blowing leads, he could potentially be the rallying cry for them that can hone that aspect of the game down, and they won't be not executing offensively or not executing defensively. They'll be playing a complete 4 quarters of football. I don't necessarily hate this hire. I just think it's important that you pair Jesse Minter with a unique offensive mind, or one that taps into the strengths of the offense. But as long as that is accomplished, I think this is a good hire for the Ravens. And for the Dolphins, I don't really know. Jeff Hafley, we got the experience of Jeff Hafley as Ohio State fans a couple of years ago when he was a defensive coordinator and elevated the defense and did tremendous things with the defensive backs. He went to Green Bay, pretty much kept the same role as well as being a defensive coordinator for them. So I'm not sure on this hire. I mean, the Dolphins are one of the teams that I think have a lot of question marks. We don't know what Tyreek Hill's status is going to be. We don't even know what Tua's status is going to be. And on top of that, they have a defense that just traded their best player, Jalen Phillips, in the middle of the season to Philadelphia. And they have a lot of question marks on that side of the ball as well. They did pair him with offensive coordinator Bobby Slowick, who called plays in Houston previously. But those are the next two hires that I think could be hit or miss for a few of these teams.
Yeah, so starting with the Jesse Minter hire, I think it's a pretty good hire. Honestly, I know it's kind of hard to judge these first-time head coaches, but I mean, the Ravens were very clearly the top head coaching job on the market, if you ask me. I mean, you got a superstar quarterback, and you got a ton of young talent on defense, which is why I wasn't surprised that they moved on from Harbaugh, but I was like, they're going to have their pick of the litter here. And I think Jesse Minter is going to do a phenomenal job with this defense. I mean, we know, Kyle Hamilton, Malachi Starks. This is a good defense. And I know really the big thing for the Ravens was, you mentioned the blowing leads. I mean, that cost them multiple games. I mean, week one against the Bills, they put up, 41 points. Derrick Henry fumbles in the fourth quarter. I believe they had a 2-score lead on the Patriots later on in the season in the fourth quarter. They had a late lead on the Steelers to win the division in the fourth quarter. Came down to a late kick. So a couple of games that just, these one-score games that just didn't necessarily go the Ravens' way. And maybe, you could argue that was because of John Harbaugh's clock management and things like that. But this is a team that is ready to compete. And I think that Lamar, his health this year didn't help either, because he came into the year injured. He missed some time due to injury. And he just didn't really look like the same athlete that we had once saw. Maybe that, is kind of a wake-up call to him, that maybe he needs to change up his play style a little bit. He is getting older. He's almost 30 years old now. I mean, we see that with, quarterbacks of his play style. You can't really rely on your legs as much. But look, Lamar has the arm talent. I have no doubt that Lamar can do it as a passer, but I think if he could buy into that this season, if he can come in healthy, the offensive side of the ball is going to be fine. So I really like the Jesse Minter hire, actually. I do think that the Ravens are going to be ready to compete. And then Jeff Hafley, again, kind of one of those hires that you just feel like, all right, a little in the middle. I do think it is a good culture change for the Dolphins. I will say, I'm a little surprised they fired Mike McDaniel. I thought the Dolphins were going to suck this year. They were getting blown out early. Then when they lost to the Browns, just killed by the Browns defense alone. I mean, Mike McDaniel looked completely lost. Tua looked really bad. So the state of the Dolphins right now, we're in a bit of a tough spot. I thought McDaniel was going to get fired after that game. He didn't. And then I believe he survived Black Monday. I believe the Dolphins, he was doing exit meetings with players. He was under the assumption he was going to stay, but then if you can get your hands on a guy like John Harbaugh, you got to take the chance, right? So they fired McDaniel in hopes that they could maybe land Harbaugh. It wasn't the case. And then they settle on Jeff Hafley. Kind of like the Steelers. I mean, it just feels like a team that's kind of in need to blow it up. I mean, they're not really good defensively. You're in a really tricky quarterback spot. I know Quinn Ewers started the end of the season. if they don't go with Tua, it's likely going to be Quinn Ewers next season, unless they go out and get a guy like Malik Willis. But yeah, I think the Dolphins are going to be in kind of a tough spot. I do think it is a good culture change, though. It's hard to say if Mike McDaniel lost the locker room or not. I know there were reports of them doing players only meetings like 3 weeks into the year, but then they were able to rattle off like 4 or 5 straight games towards that back half of the season, really after they got blown out on, was it Thursday night against the Ravens, where they just looked terrible. They were getting booed off the field. So Jeff Hafley, kind of how we feel like with Monken, kind of an in the middle hire. Totally going to depend on what they do throughout the offseason. Has some upside to end up being a good hire, but could very easily see it going bad. So to recap, Jesse Minter, great hire. Jeff Hafley, very eh.
And with that, we have just a few more hires to discuss, by my count, 3, and then we'll talk about the 2 vacancies that remain. So we'll go ahead and turn this over. Almost all these hires as well in the AFC, just felt like noting that there's a large amount of AFC openings in comparison to the NFC. But one of the NFC hirings that was fulfilled was John Harbaugh leaving Baltimore, going to the New York Football Giants to hopefully revitalize what New York Giants football is. It hasn't been what people saw it being before the 2000s, like what it was back in the day, I should say. And even in the early Eli Manning era with Tom Coughlin, they had some very good seasons, but they also had some very down seasons. So I think bringing in Harbaugh gives a chance for the Giants to stabilize their expectations from a year-to-year basis. And even when there is roster turnover and roster change, they know what they have in that coaching staff to hopefully not necessarily elevate the play of anybody, but in this case, maybe be floor raisers. Maybe the Giants' floor is 3-4 wins. Maybe they can get 6, 7, or 8 wins out of this team on a consistent year basis, and then one of those years they pop off and they hit 10, 11, 12 wins. They also bring in defensive coordinator Denard Wilson, and then Chris Horton as the assistant head coach and special teams coordinator. So they made some changes throughout the entirety of the staff. It was expected that Todd Monken would follow John Harbaugh to New York as to be the offensive coordinator. That did not happen. So they are still looking for an offensive coordinator, but I do think they're in a good position right now as it is. And then also Joe Brady moving from offensive coordinator to head coach for the Bills. I wasn't sure what direction they were going to go. Ultimately, they just promoted their offensive coordinator, someone who is highly sought after as well, just 36 years old. He has a chance to be in Buffalo for a very long time. And then also Robert Saleh getting back in the head coaching game. I wasn't expecting him to get hired in this cycle, but he was. And he also brought in Brian Daboll as his offensive coordinator. So I think that's a really good pairing. Someone that can take over the defensive administrative role and then Daboll to control the offense. And one note on that as well, Brian Daboll was very adamant and he was pushing for the Giants to try and trade up and take Cam Ward last year. They offered pick number 3. They offered, I believe, another first-round pick and 2 second-rounders to move up from 3 to 1 to take Cam Ward, and that did not happen. So I'll be fascinated to see how that pairing with Daboll and Ward works. So overall, I think that these last 3 hires that we're about to discuss, pretty good hires for the most part. I mean, the Bills are pretty stable. They've got a good roster. I don't think Joe Brady has to do anything special. I just think, kind of like the owner of the Bills, Petula mentioned, just they hit a playoff wall, and sometimes you need a change of scenery, a change of voice to get you over the hump, and maybe Joe Brady does that. But I do think keeping someone in-house and promoting them leaves the chance for that stability to remain rather than a lot of uncertainty. There's still going to be uncertainty, but I think overall Buffalo is going to be what we've seen them be. I think the Titans, if they can fix the defensive side of the ball, which is why you go get Robert Saleh, they have a chance to be a pretty solid team and at least be a contender for their division, because we saw flashes from Cam Ward late in the season. We saw flashes from the receiving core that's very young, by the way. 2 rookie receivers, a young tight end, and 2 running backs that are pretty skilled. So I like the Titans offensively, but they got to get an offensive line and provide some stability for the defense. So overall, I liked all 3 of these hires. I thought that they all made sense, and I feel like if I could have predicted the destinations, these probably would have been some of the places I would have said.
Yeah, I think the John Harbaugh hire to the Giants, I think it makes the most sense. Outside of the Ravens job, I mean, the Giants job was probably what the second or third best job, right? Depending on how you viewed Atlanta. But look, you got a young quarterback. You've got Malik Neighbors coming off of injury, so you've got a young quarterback with a proven wide receiver one. You got good pieces on defense, and you have to feel like the Giants are only a couple of pieces away from really competing, right? And now you bring in a veteran leader, a new voice to the room that's going to command the locker room. I have to feel like this is a home run hire for the Giants. If Jackson Dart can continue to develop and they can, get better on the defensive end. So not much to say there for John Harbaugh. I think it's a great pairing. I think he's going to have a ton of success there. For the Titans, Robert Saleh, it's hard to tell with his first head coaching gig. That first head coaching gig for a lot of these coordinators is so tough, especially when you go to a team like the Browns or the Jets or the Titans. A team where it's just some dysfunction up top. You're not really given a good roster. You're kind of behind the eight ball, and then you're not really given the time to succeed. So who knows, how good Robert Saleh really is. I will say I was not all that impressed with the 49ers defense down the stretch. I know they were injured. They were missing Fred Warner. I know they were really banged up, but how much of that was Robert Saleh? How much of that, was just injuries? We don't really know. But I think this is a good fit for him. I think the Titans are going to have to do a lot of work with their roster. I mean, they are just kind of in a void of talent really everywhere, but they've got a ton of cap space. They've got some draft picks. But I think what really makes that hire good, like as you mentioned, the Brian Daboll pairing. I think he's going to be a good OC. You mentioned he had interest in Cam Ward. Anybody who had watched Cam Ward, I mean, I didn't really get to watch a ton of full Titans games this year, but I've seen a lot of Cam Ward tape. Man, can he sling it. I mean, he's got a lot of talent. He's made a lot of plays this year that if he had better receivers, his numbers might have been that much better. So there's clearly a ton of talent there. I think Brian Daboll is absolutely going to get the best out of him. I mean, he had a pretty good hand in Jackson Dart. Jackson Dart looked good from the beginning. I mean, I have a feeling Brian Daboll played a part in that, which is why I was kind of surprised when they fired him. I know it wasn't really resulting in wins there in New York, but your young quarterback was clearly taking a leap. He was clearly developing in front of your eyes, and you moved on from the coach. It didn't really make a ton of sense, but I do think this is a good pairing there in Tennessee. And then Joe Brady just feels like Josh Allen has his hands all over this, right? I mean, I know there were reports of Josh Allen going to have a say, going to be, in these head coaching meetings, which I don't really know how to feel about that. But this really feels like, this is somebody who Josh Allen is comfortable with. And look, personally, I think Joe Brady is just really riding the coattails of that 2019 LSU run. But he is a good coordinator. I was really impressed with the Bills' run game this season. I think James Cook proved that he was absolutely worth every penny of that extension. It's really a big reason why they had as good of a season as they did. I've never been that high on the Bills. Year in and year out, everybody hypes them up, and I just continue to say they don't really have a Super Bowl contending roster. They have the quarterback, but other than that, the receivers are constantly lacking ever since they got rid of Stephon Diggs. Defensively, they've always just kind of been middle of the pack, slightly above average at best, and really up until this year, they never had that big of a run game. So I do think that they'll have some work to do. I think they've got to make some moves on defense to get better. I mean, you gave up 33 points in the playoff game to the Broncos. I know it's a good offense, but this Bills defense is just nothing spectacular. I mean, it's very, very middle of the pack. So I don't know how much Joe Brady is going to contribute on the defensive side of the ball. I will say, though, I do like keeping some of these hires in-house. I know it hasn't worked before, but it just almost makes a lot of sense, right? I mean, could Joe Brady be that next Sean McVay, as everybody likes to say? I mean, he's clearly a good offensive mind. I wasn't all that impressed with the Bills' passing game this season, but again, was that because of a lack of talent at the receiver position? I'm not really sure. But probably the best hire for the Bills, considering that they came late to the head coaching search. I mean, obviously they were the last team to fire their coach. They kind of, they missed out on Harbaugh. They missed out on Jesse Minter. They missed out on some of these other top name guys in this cycle. They missed out on Stefanski. So I think given the situation, I think this gives them a pathway to success over a number of years, because if Joe Brady and this offense continue to do what they do, you're going to have Joe Brady for a long time. So I would agree with you on these three hires. John Harbaugh completely knocked it out of the park. I'm excited for the Titans hire in Saleh and Daboll. That's a good pairing. And then the Bills, I think it just makes sense with Joe Brady.
And I think the Bills were always leaning in Joe Brady. They needed someone to convince them otherwise. And I also thought for a period of time Brian Daboll might just end up back in Buffalo, but now as the head coach. And that would just leave the question of what Joe Brady's role would be there. So I think that these were all very good hires, like you said. Some of the coaches who got fired and not rehired as head coaches, right? Like Mike McDaniel, OC with the Chargers. I think it's a good fit. If and Mike McDaniel, one thing about him, people probably think of him as a pass happy coordinator. He does some very creative things in the run game that opens that aspect up. That's why, as an Eagles fan, I wanted Mike McDaniel as our offensive coordinator. I wanted Brian Dable as our offensive coordinator. We didn't get either one of them. So at the end of the day, I don't really know where the Eagles will go for their offensive coordinator position. The Lions, they went and got an offensive coordinator. There's a few other teams still in the search for someone to take over their coordinating roles. Jonathan Gannon, fired from the Cardinals, he goes to Green Bay to replace Jeff Hafley. So there are 2 remaining head coaching spots left. Jonathan Gannon, when he got fired from the Cardinals, so Arizona's still without a head football coach. And then also the Raiders, after firing not only Pete Carroll, but also Chip Kelly, they are in need of somebody who wants to take over that aspect of their team. They also fired their special teams coordinator. So I do think between those 2 jobs, to be honest, I can't believe I'm saying it, but I think the Raiders might have a little bit more appeal. They have the first pick. You can do a lot with it. I personally would trade out because of what their team needs are and how the quarterback draft class is looking, in my opinion. But then also, they have $100 million in cap space. For context, the Patriots just had $100 million in cap space this last offseason, hired Mike Vrabel, and now they're going to the Super Bowl. So, and I know we all know all the stuff on Twitter, the Patriots memes about the easiest schedule in the league. In fact, third easiest since I think 1970 for teams to get to the Super Bowl. I mean, Patriots, they spent money, they believed in their new head coach, and they were able to turn the tide for what would be the foreseeable future of their franchise. The Raiders will likely be doing the same, and I do think Tom Brady, as part owner, is going to have a big role in who this hire is. And I haven't heard a ton regarding interviews for this position. Same thing for the Cardinals. Barely heard a lick of things for the Cardinals and who's going to take over their head coaching job. But I do think both of these offer appeal in different ways. The Cardinals have Trey McBride. They have Marvin Harrison. They have Michael Wilson, who emerged late into the season as a very good receiver for this team. They have James Conner coming back from injury, and behind him, 3 other running backs you can have a little bit of faith in. I guess the question for the Cardinals would be their quarterback situation. We got great production from Jacoby Brissett as a backup, and it makes you wonder what it is about the Cardinals. Like, has it been a Kyler Murray issue? Because Jacoby Brissett got the ball to those receivers on time. He got the ball to them efficiently. He got the ball to them very often. Now, there were some games they had to throw 40, 45 times, but the receivers were happy with Jacoby Brissett. When Kyler's in the game, it feels like the offense changes. He's not able to get the ball out to his receivers as effectively, and that limits what they can do on that side of the ball. For the Raiders, they frankly have team needs at everything but tight end and running back. And I think they probably should trade Max Crosby for the sake of their franchise moving forward. I just think it makes sense. But if they don't, you do have that star defensive edge rusher, and you just need to put the pieces around him. So these are the 2 hires that are still yet to be determined, and I'll be curious to see who goes to those destinations.
Yeah, I'm not really surprised about the Cardinals when these head coaching openings, vacancies came out. I thought the Cardinals were the least attractive opening. You don't really have a ton of talent. You mentioned outside of Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison, maybe Michael Wilson. I guess you want to throw Will Johnson in there at corner. I mean, there's just not a ton of talent on the roster. It's a murky quarterback situation with Kyler Murray. It's just not really that enticing of a job. I'm really surprised by the Raiders' job, though. I mean, like, I know they have not really been that good of a team, and I don't know how well liked Al Davis is around the league. And I know you got to work under Tom Brady, but I mean, you have the number 1 overall pick, so you're either getting Fernando Mendoza. I know you mentioned the idea of trading out. That's always a possibility of acquiring assets. You've got a couple of nice pieces with Max Crosby, Ashton Jeanty, Brock Bowers. I know the O-line definitely needs some work. You're paying Geno Smith. So, I mean, I know it's not the most attractive job in the world, but It's a pretty prime location in Las Vegas. You are either getting that number one overall pick, so you are either getting a Heisman winner in Fernando Mendoza. So I will ask you this: the Titans last year, it's a one quarterback draft, and you happen to have the number one overall pick. Would they have benefited from trading out and getting a haul for Cam Ward? Because to be honest, I'm sure the Raiders could get more for this number one overall pick than the Titans were going to get last year, just because Mendoza, just a bigger frame, a Heisman winner, all of that, won the national championship. I mean, he's kind of at the peak right now. But I do want to ask you, if you were the Titans, would you have traded back?
At the time, during the draft, because I had if they weren't going to take Cam Ward, they would have taken Shedeur. They had not talked to Jackson Dart at all, to my understanding. Like, there wasn't another quarterback that they had interest in. So if the plan was to take Shedeur, I would have traded back. And obviously, we saw the aftermath of the whole Shedeur thing anyway. But I felt like if they were going to sit at one, the pick was going to be Cam Ward. And at the time, they just had that had more to do with the fact that for me, like, how many air raid style quarterbacks have had true success in the NFL? And not just air raid, like the Washington State Mike Leach type air raid quarterbacks, right? Like, they've had several of them that put up all these numbers in college football. None of them, outside of Gardner Minshew for the one season, that one crazy year he had, have had success in the NFL, because it's a different type of offense. So it had more to do with schematically, like if the Titans would have been able to feasibly build their roster around Cam Ward. And to be honest, it just felt it dealt with the fact that, like what you said, they have a lot of holes on their team. And just, this is my opinion, I think in terms of roster building, it makes more sense to get as many assets as possible, try to hit on as many of those as you can, and the ones that you don't, you reload, right? You replenish, you trade, you do what you can. Like, for example, the Eagles have mastered this thing called value. So you're going to hit on the 20th pick as many times as you hit on the 24th pick. So if you have pick 20, you can trade back to 24, knowing the success rate is the exact same on the pick, and then also gain a day 2 or day 3 pick alongside that selection. Then you have a better chance at getting another player later on in the draft to help your roster. Like, there's just small, tiny things when it comes to drafting that teams can do to manipulate the system to better their football team. And I think for some of these teams, and really most of them, when they do have the first pick, they're very keen on just using that pick, not trading out. I think the Panthers-Bears trade is one of the few that we saw a big haul like that for a player like Caleb Williams. And to be honest, after this season, I think we had our reservations for the longest time about who the winner of the trade was, but I think the Panthers are finally in the state of putting the pieces together after that trade. The Bears are obviously flourishing because of the trade. I think you could say they're a clear winner because of it, but the Panthers are finally at that point where they've moved on from that DJ Moore era and they're fully committed to Bryce Young. They're expected to pick up his option. So I just think for the Raiders, with as many needs as they have, which literally is like every place on the football field except like Max Crosby, Genty Bowers, and probably like Robert Spillane or anybody like that. Like, I just think they probably should trade out. And if they're not going to trade out, probably trade Max Crosby, keep the pick, and go from there. That's kind of how I would pivot that. But to answer your question, I think I would probably have kept it if I was Tennessee, if I was taking Cam Ward. And if it was Shedeur, probably just trade back knowing I could get him later on.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. I mean, the Raiders do have 9 picks in this draft. So if they take Mendoza 1, they've got a second rounder, a third rounder, 3 fourth rounders, a fifth rounder, and then a late sixth and a seventh. So I mean, like they have picks in this draft, but like, are they really one draft away? I don't necessarily think so. I mean, I don't really know how many teams picking at the top of the draft are one draft away. I mean, you look at the Browns last year; they had one of the better draft classes that we can remember, and it resulted in just 5 wins. I know they didn't necessarily hit on the quarterback quite yet, but still. I mean, I know we've talked a little bit about Fernando Mendoza. I don't know if there's really a guarantee that he's a bona fide superstar in the NFL. I honestly think in the NFL we're kind of getting away from the days of you have to have the superstar quarterback. I mean, take a look at the 2 quarterbacks in the Super Bowl. second-year Drake May and retread Sam Darnold. Now they're both playing really good. I mean, I understand Drake May had an MVP type year, and Sam Darnold lived up to the contract that he got. He was worth every penny. But like these guys have help around them. I mean, Drake May hasn't even really played that great in the playoffs this year, but the Patriots defense has absolutely been phenomenal. But he's played complimentary football. He's done what he's had to in the playoffs for them to win the game. And yeah, I know he had a great regular season, but then Sam Darnold, they put pieces around him, right? Jackson Smith-Njigba has been phenomenal. They've been able to run the football. They've got a good defense. So I think you're kind of seeing a new wave of the NFL of kind of the emphasis on the team. And I think that kind of got overlooked the last couple of years because, I mean, what did the Chiefs have? A really good offensive mind in Andy Reid, and they had Patrick Mahomes. I know they had Travis Kelce and other pieces, of course, but, they lost to the Eagles last year because the Eagles had a good team. I mean, we argued all offseason, is Jalen Hurts a top 5 quarterback? Is he a top 10 quarterback? No matter where you put it. Jalen Hurts probably isn't the best quarterback in football. They won because they had a good team and he played complimentary football. So I kind of think that's kind of the wave of the new NFL now. I mean, take a look at the Bills. I don't think they win because they don't have the best team. I mean, they rely on Josh Allen to play hero ball, and yeah, that might work in a weak division in the regular season. But you get to the playoffs and you play these other good teams. You've got to be able to play good team football. You got to be able to play complimentary football, and I honestly think that is kind of the new wave that the NFL is going. So it wouldn't shock me if the Raiders trade out. I haven't heard any reports or anything that they're interested in doing so. I fully expect them to take Fernando Mendoza. But then here's the thing. All right, you take Fernando Mendoza. You don't put the adequate pieces around him in year one. Is your first year head coach on the hot seat? I mean, are you messing with Fernando Mendoza's development? I think those are all fair questions here because, when you get into these drafts that are, kind of one quarterback drafts, I think that kind of helps teams play into more of that team factor instead of just going all in on the quarterback, because I don't really know if we're going to see a draft class again like we did just a couple of years ago of Caleb Williams, Jaden Daniels, Drake May, just a loaded quarterback class like that. I mean, that was supposed to be this year, right, with Drew Aller, Cade Klubnik, Garrett Nussmeier, all these names. It wasn't the case. I know you've seen the same list of next year of all these guys coming out, Dante Moore, Julian Sayin, the list goes on and on, Darian Mensah, the list goes on. But who knows if that's going to be the case, because we saw that this year. But so I do think that it's kind of the new wave of the NFL is an importance on team. And so I think that might be more of an approach, because remember the Browns were picking 2 last year. They obviously weren't dead set on a quarterback, but they traded back, they got the assets, and they capitalized on the assets. So that might be kind of the way the teams are going now.
I agree 100%. And you brought up the 2 Super Bowl quarterbacks, so we'll quickly transition into that topic right there, the conference championship games, the Patriots winning the gut-wrenching 10-7 game against Jarrett Stidham and the Broncos. And we both felt like Stidham would keep Denver in the game and potentially beat New England, but unfortunately they couldn't even muster up 2 scoring drives to beat New England, or at least tie them and take it to overtime. And then the Rams, Seahawks, all 3 games this year just lived up to expectation. And I think out of all 3, this one probably lived up to it the least, just because of the way the back and forth was of the game. That one, or the one in LA, that was very low scoring with 2 great defenses. So we had a matchup where we saw the defenses, we had a matchup where we saw the offenses, and then this matchup was almost a combination of both. I mean, both quarterbacks threw for over 300 plus yards. Stafford almost 350, Darnold over 300, multiple touchdowns, efficiency there. And ultimately, the Seahawks just making more plays to get the win. So I do think it's a missed opportunity for the Rams and Matthew Stafford. But the Seattle team is very good, and I am definitely leaning towards the Seahawks in the Super Bowl against the Patriots.
Yeah, I think it's hard to go against the Seahawks right now. I mean, they're probably the most complete team in the NFL. I mean, and this kind of just goes to my point that, you have to be able to build that team. I mean, obviously they put it together with, a really good head coach. Mike Macdonald has been phenomenal. I don't think anybody really thought that the Seahawks would be here at the start of the year. And same with the Patriots. I mean, when Sam Darnold went to Seattle, I think it kind of felt like, you're taking a pretty big gamble on a guy who's had one good year, in Kevin O'Connell's system. Who knows? And, they moved on from DK Metcalf, moved on from Tyler Lockett. So I think it really is remarkable what they've done in one year. But, yeah, I find it really hard to go against the Seahawks here. I mean, I just think when it comes down to it, I look at what they've done in the playoffs. You could argue Sam Darnold won them that game last week. I mean, he threw for almost 350 yards, 3 touchdowns, didn't turn it over. He played great. And then you kind of look at the Patriots, and I don't want to say they've squeaked by because they've played really good defensively, but like Drake May had what 5 turnovers in the first two games of the playoffs. He didn't hasn't really impressed. And I mean, I know he's a second year quarterback and he's young and the ceiling is sky high, absolutely, but he just hasn't played as well as Sam Darnold has in these playoffs. And I know the weather played a part in that in the second half last week, but I just don't know if the Patriots are going to be able to rely on their defense the way that they have these past couple of games. Because if Sam Darnold isn't turning it over, I mean, it's going to be tough to stop this offense. But I will say, I think the Patriots match up a little bit defensively. Uh, I expect Christian Gonzalez to be on Jackson Smith and Jigba. It's going to be iron on iron right there. I mean, that's going to be a phenomenal matchup. So we'll see who wins there. But I think this game is going to be won in the trenches. If Seattle can control the running game, and if they're able to move the ball, on first down, if they're able to run the football, I think they're going to have success and probably win the football game because I do expect Seattle's defense to step up. I think Seattle has a slight defensive edge in this one, although both defenses are playing really good. But the spread's like 4.5. I mean, I could see Seattle winning by a touchdown, maybe. I could see them winning by about 4. So I think it's going to be a close game. I don't think we're going to have a blowout or anything, but it's hard to pick against Seattle right now.
I'm definitely leaning Seattle as well, and that is going to be a great matchup. Christian Gonzalez against Jackson Smith and Jigba. But it just feels like JSN has won every matchup this year and will find a way to continue winning these matchups. Seattle does a lot of unique things pre-snap, especially with JSN and Cooper Kupp, two guys who, at least for Jackson Smith and Jigba in previous years and at Ohio State, he flourished in the slot. He was amazing there. And then you have Cooper Kupp, who is known for being in the slot. So they've found ways to get both guys either in the slot, either in like tight slots at the line of scrimmage, or they get JSN pre-snap motion. They give him time to get ahead of the defense and go from there, get that head of steam. And frankly, JSN is a tactician when it comes to his route tree. He's very, very sound as a receiver. He catches almost everything that comes his way. He gets open. He creates a lot of separation. I mean, he's just really hard to cover. But you factor in the fact that when Seattle can run the football, they're really hard to beat. They have an O-line that has protected Sam Darnold for the most part all year. Kenneth Walker's very good at running back. He's had a little bit of a regression, but despite that, still a very good back. They've gotten unexpected contributions in the tight end room, especially late in the season. So I think they have some more unique ways to play the game of offense, especially when you acquire Rashid Shaheed and you see the impact he's had in the playoffs. They essentially have 3 players who would flourish in the slot, and they're able to make all of them work at the same time on the field. And for the Patriots, they are definitely a old school kind of Vrabel light Tennessee team. They want to run the football, punch you in the mouth defensively, and expect their quarterback to play good enough football to not turn it over, but also not lose you the football game. And I think Ryan Tannehill for a few years did a phenomenal job at that. He barely turned the ball over. He handed the ball off to Derrick Henry. They had a great O-line at that time, and they had a sound defense. And I do see a lot of similarities with this New England team to the peak Tennessee Titans teams led by Mike Vrabel. And I think ultimately it is going to come down to a couple of things. Gonzalez versus JSN. Are they able to limit JSN? Like, realistically, if Jackson Smith and Jigba has 6 or more catches, he probably has at least 90 to 110 yards. Therefore, Seahawks are moving the football. I think they got to find ways to get him out of the offense as much as possible, limit his opportunities, and when Sam Darnold does try to throw it to him, either put pressure on the quarterback or make those throws difficult. So whether that's tight windows, whether that's double teams, triple teams, they got to disguise their coverages very well. And then also for New England, running the football. I think the emergence of the duo of Ramondre Stevenson and TreVeyon Henderson has really helped Drake May. It's really helped the offense move the football, and it's also protected their offensive line at times. So I think that if Seattle can limit the run game, like you said, win in the trenches, they probably win this football game. Statistically, their defense is almost on par with the Legion of Boom defense from, I think, 2015. So this defense is really underrated. It's very, very good. It's like you said, It helps make them a complete football team, probably the most complete team in the league. And I think they're going to cause some problems for Drake May, and he's had problems the entire postseason. But I think, obviously, with the extra week of preparation, I think both of these teams will come ready to play. I feel this being a 24, 21, 27, 24 type of game. I don't think we're going to hit 30 points. I don't think we're going to have under 20. I do think both offenses are going to score enough or score off of their defenses help enough to get this done. But it really could come down to special teams. I mean, Jason Myers has been phenomenal all season long for Seattle. He can kick about 60 yards if needed. They have Shaheed as a return man, obviously, so we've seen that affect Super Bowls of the past, like the Chiefs and Eagles game. The ability in the return game to flip the field back is huge. So I think what happens there is potentially going to be a big factor in the game because the Patriots have a great return game and special teams unit as well with Marcus Jones.
Yeah, I mean, it really is going to come down to the defenses because the Patriots' defense has, I mentioned, they've been playing just as good as anybody. I mean, they've been playing just as good as Seattle's defense. I mean, I know that they were going against Jarrett Stidham last game. I mean, but Jarrett Stidham, after that touchdown drive, other than that, they were largely taken out of the game. I mean, they had C.J. Stroud's that entire offense in complete shambles. I mean, they had Justin Herbert in hell. I know that neither of those offenses are really, as good as Seattle's, but this is a good defense. They've got really good up front. I mean, I think if they can limit the running game for Seattle, they're going to have success. I mean, this game, almost kind of like Miami, Indiana, I think it's going to be won in the trenches. And I feel like it's been a while since we've really been able to say that for a Super Bowl. I know some people might have said that for the Eagles last year, but that didn't really matter. The Eagles didn't really need to win in the trenches to win that game. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a good game. I think it is interesting. I mean, it's two teams. I know it's the Patriots, but it's not Tom Brady. It's not Bill Belichick. It's a completely different Patriots team. And then the Seahawks. I mean, they haven't really been in the Super Bowl since their Russell Wilson days. And again, it's a completely different team as well. So I think really either outcome, I think NFL fans are really happy for it. And I think it's interesting because it was kind of the same way with college football, especially after Ohio State had gotten taken down. It was going to be a guaranteed new team to win it all. Especially after Georgia went down as well. And it's kind of the same with the NFL, or these four teams that we had left. I know the Rams won it a couple of years ago. I mean, there's going to be a team that is going to be a new winner, and I think that's just great, great parity across all sports.
Just took the word for me. The parity has been exciting, lived up to expectation for the NFL and for college football. We just need some more of it, and I think we do have a lot of it in sports like NBA or college basketball. I think potentially in NBA there's too much parity, and in college basketball, March Madness, anything can happen, as we have found out time and time again. So I do think there is some parity there, but out of all four of those, probably the least amount. And then we don't even have to talk about the MLB because we know there is kind of a lack of parity, and they'll be going into a 2027 lockout soon, which we'll be talking about a different day. But with that, we'll go ahead and conclude here. You guys have now reached the end of episode 19. I want to appreciate everybody for listening, watching, whatever it is you're listening and watching it from, whatever various platform, like, subscribe, share, whatever it is you do on that platform, please do it. Help us win the algorithm. It's hard to beat the algorithm, so help us in that quest. And then also, if you guys have any feedback, questions, topics you want us to discuss, please let us know. We try to stay active on the social media and check those things. Overall, a little bit of a shorter one. The last two episodes, an hour and 15 minutes. This is kind of more of our sweet spot. We'll go ahead and conclude. Thank everybody for watching, listening, whatever it is you do, and we'll catch you guys in the next one.